I'm Leo Warder for Kit Guru. This is Leo Says Episode 2, end of the first week of November. So last week I referred to the Titan XP Collector's Edition graphics card that was coming out sometime soon. Well, that sometime soon has passed, and I have to say it is far, far less than I hoped. In a galaxy far, far away, it turns out, according to the press release, Star Wars fans, Nvidia has a GPU for your light side and dark side, so you can have a Jedi Order card or a Galactic Empire version, i.e. you can have it in red or green. And there's all sorts of talks about how the shroud of the fan and the cooling system is weathered aluminium and they look different, and you can order one of each colour should you so choose at $1,200 pounds euros, i.e. exactly the same price as a regular Titan XP, because it is exactly the same as a regular Titan XP. Same card, different shroud. And there's also the Jedi Order GPU simulates the wear and tear and battle-worn finish of many items used by the Rebel Alliance and so on and so forth. The Galactic Empire GPUs features simple, clean lines emulating the high-end orderly nature of the resource-rich Empire. And the thing is, apart from blimey, that was underwhelming, is I cannot, if I have a Venn diagram, and here we have fans of Star Wars, and here we have people who are going to spend $1,200 on a Titan XP for their professional work system, I suspect those two circles do not overlap in any way, shape or form. If it was a GTX 1060 Star Wars Collector Edition, I can see that sounding like hotcakes, I really can, even at a small premium. But the idea of a Titan XP €1,200 with that shroud on it, whatever. And you can only buy one of each, because you're not going to want two of the same in your super duper high-end system. It amazes me. And also, were I to spend the extra quite clearly gamers, GTX 1080 Ti is 11/12 of a Titan XP, so you're crazy if you buy the Titan XP for gaming, that's obvious. But I cannot imagine having a Titan XP in my work system if I didn't water cool the thing. Running air cool with the Titan XP strikes me as missing a trick or two, so you're going to take off the shroud, in which case perhaps eBay, perhaps you better buy them on eBay, who knows. Anyway, don't want to bang on too much, but the collector's edition, it's Star Wars, I honestly could not care less. A great shame. So many things they could have done, but not that. Were in the event they go further, GTX 1060, maybe even 1070, yeah, I'd like to see that. Oh, and while we're on the subject, so GTX 1070 Ti has now launched, and my question now is, GTX 1060 Ti next? Why not? I mean, let's just keep on returning to the golden goose and take yet another golden egg out of it. I don't want to see it. I really don't want to see a 1060 Ti, but I don't see any reason why Nvidia wouldn't do that. So we'll see. And I'll come up with some more absurd predictions if I can, and they'll probably come up with that as well and make fortunes out of it. That's the thing. The more ridiculous the suggestion, the more money they'll make. VRMs on motherboards have voltage regulator modules, have been in tech news now for some months. X299 launched. There was lots of flack, as everyone who knows about these things and cares about these things will be aware. We've seen some low-end models of motherboard that are attempting to supply heaps of juice to toasty processors and sockets, and so they're flowing a load of power through the motherboard, and the consequences are not necessarily good. We've got Threadripper seems to go well, X299 question mark, because those are toasty processors, and Coffee Lake replacing Kaby Lake. Coffee Lake requires slightly more power under load than Kaby Lake did. Stock, it's about the same. Once you start overclocking, the 6 cores rather than 4 want more juice. It seems to be more of an Intel thing than an AMD thing, this. Which again seems to be down to how much heat you can then get out of the processor. But we've really focused on the processor rather than the VRMs in the main. The VRMs, yeah, if you're unlocking the motherboard and you're really just taking off the safeties and pumping in the power. But there's recently been a thing about the Gigabyte Z370 Aorus Ultra Gaming, which is a motherboard I have lined up for review, which is fairly far down the product stack. It's only got 4 phases of power and 4 layers, and it's thrown up something interesting. We've seen in news elsewhere that the VRMs can run around 100 degrees Celsius at stock clocks, because the motherboard is drawing significantly more power than comparable models of Z370 from other makers, and up to around 50 watts, but typically somewhat less than that. And that extra power is all down to the BIOS. So the BIOS tells the motherboard what it should do, the power flows, the processor gets the juice it wants, and any extra is dissipated as heat. But it seems to be excessive amounts of power, because presumably Aorus is using a lookup table for the processor. It's early days with Coffee Lake. Let's face it, you can't buy a blooming Coffee Lake, as I was banging on before. So the lookup table says put this much juice through the system to feed the processor, and it would seem that you can undervolt that board quite significantly. I'm going to have to get my backside into gear and get on with a review of it to find out how far you can undervolt it. But if you undervolt it, less power, in this instance take say 30 watts out of the equation, means you got less excess heat. Everyone's going to be happy. But there is the thing that VRMs are safe to 125 or maybe even 130 degrees, which means that if they're running around 100, that is a lot hotter than you'd like them to be. You'd want them around 60 or 70, but you're still way inside the safety limits. So it's almost a philosophical question. If the VRMs and the system is drawing more power than it requires, and a BIOS update would undeniably fix it, then you're putting more power through the VRMs, you're getting more heat into the system. That is undesirable, no two ways about it, but you are still way inside the safety limits of the board. So in this instance, it's a 4-phase, 4-layer board. It's getting toasty. Obviously, if you get decent cooling across the system, that will help. But if you, instead of being at 70 degrees or at 100, but the safe limit's 125 or 130, and the board therefore is way off throttling, the processor is entirely happy, therefore the end user who's not looking at system power draw wouldn't know. Question is, should we care? I'm happy to undervolt and get less power, less heat, that's a good thing. But if it doesn't throttle, should we care? Is this one of these things where techies are getting their knickers in a twist, or is it actually a problem? Comment below, please. Moving on, VRMs. Asrock has announced 2 XE versions of 2 existing X299 boards, so the Tai Chi and the Fatality Professional, basically different color schemes, and I think the Professional's got better Ethernet, but broadly speaking, very similar boards. They've done something interesting. So this is not replacing the existing models. This is in addition to the existing models, hence there's a premium. They've put bigger heat sinks on the VRMs at the north end of the board. They've put in a bigger heat sink behind the I/O panel. They've cut away the I/O shroud. They've linked the 2 heat sinks with heat pipe, and they've put another 12 volt power socket up at the top of the board to give extra juice to the processor socket. So you've got extra VRM cooling, better VRM cooling, and also the extra power supply. I'll be interested to see how that works out. I've actually got the X299 Tai Chi here at the moment, but I've got the X299 Tai Chi XE coming, so I'll be able to do a back-to-back comparison. Interested to see how that goes, because the X299 platform was slated by Der Bauer, albeit in delidded CPU mode and pumping in ungodly amounts of power, like hundreds of extra watts. But this looks like a good move. I'll be fascinated to see if it's proper engineering or just marketing. I'm inclining towards the proper engineering, but that, yeah, like that, happy. And then we come to graphics. So we've done the Star Wars graphics. Now we come to other graphics. And we've had a slew of stories which are kind of all interconnected. And interconnect's actually a play on words, inadvertently. EMID, Embedded Multi-Die Interconnect Bridge, that comes up. So Intel has announced a mobile 8th gen CPU, i.e. for laptops. Although it's called 8th gen, it looks like it's Kaby Lake, whereas 8th gen should be Coffee Lake, but they've done this with their 7th and 8th gen naming, so don't get too worried about that. So it's an H series mobile CPU with Kaby Lake technology with an AMD Graphics Core. This was rumoured a few months ago and was flatly denied by all concerned, and in fact it's entirely true, which just goes to show that shouldn't believe anything you're told. And the interesting thing is that AMD has been using an interposer to connect HBM2 and graphics cores together. Intel has done something different. They've gone, apparently it's either no interposer or this EMID is just like a communication channel. Means that you have less Z height to worry about, less thickness in the board. They can do this within the PCB. So they've got a package which is processor, AMD Graphics Core, HBM2 memory, which is interesting to say the least, to see HBM2 on the go. And it would appear the graphics core is Polaris rather than Vega. This is a custom graphics core, but then it would need, or semi-custom, it would need to be, because it's using this EMIB interconnect. So it would appear that AMD has been approached by Intel to make a graphics core for their mobile, which would appear to mean, which surely means Intel saying, all right, we admit it, we can't make a graphics core for Toffee. Actually, they can. They've done some clever things with graphics, but they don't scale well. Therefore, in terms of performance and gaming, they're hopeless. So they said, we need to be able to play AAA games on our laptops. Give us a graphics core. You have to think AMD's taken a position which is, well, we currently have zero presence in the gaming laptop market. It's all Nvidia. So, okay, we're game. They've used Polaris technology linked to HBM2 memory. And I have to wonder who's going to make that HBM2. Will that be Intel themselves? That's a question to keep an eye on. Intel then takes the graphics cores, assembles a package which is Intel processor, this EMIB to connect them up, the AMD Graphics Core, the HBM2 memory. They've then got a package they can sell to laptop manufacturers. We're going to see this in Q1 of 2018, which I hope means we'll see it at CES in Las Vegas in the first week of 2018, and then we'll see products going on sale. There is talk of support for AAA games, so therefore you'd hope that means decent performance, 45-watt CPU, and then Polaris graphics and various figures. Oh, here we go. Two model codes that have popped up online: Core i7-8705G, Core i7-8809G. I mean, snappy or what? What do they mean? And they appear to be processor core, as you'd expect, 4-core, 8-thread, base speed 2.81 gigahertz. Question, as always, is, and what's that turbo to? And then the graphics, apparently GFX 804, hence Polaris, 24 compute units, clock speed 1 gigahertz, 4 gigabytes HBM2, at the moment mooted to be probably closer to GTX 1050 Ti than it is to GTX 1060, which means what? So not really VR ready, although some people would tell you it is. Probably not earth-shaking news at the moment, probably not terrifying to Nvidia in this spin, but you would think that there's got to be scope for improvement. So depending on how well that works, power draw, performance, and this interconnect that we haven't yet seen in action, that sounds to me as though Nvidia should be starting to get concerned. Because if Intel can flog what is, to all intents and purposes, an APU, albeit by using AMD graphics power, then they don't need Nvidia for the meat and drink level of laptops. If they can get to the level of competing with GTX 1060 and make a Zeus MSI Compal compact, not compact anymore, no, Compal being an ODM, and all those people that use those chassis, if they can sell gaming laptops that don't have Nvidia, that's going to hurt Nvidia. It's going to give AMD extra revenue, although as to how much they'll make out of it, who knows. You have to think it'll be AMD graphics software because it's AMD graphics hardware, so remains to be seen how that works. Question there, which do you prefer, AMD software or Intel software? Intel graphics software's got a fairly stinky reputation, frankly. Time will tell on that one. But it's not just laptops, I don't think, because another name, a couple of names actually that have cropped up are Hades Canyon VR. They reference the Intel NUC, Next Unit of Computing, which is tiddly little computers, which are not dissimilar to Gigabyte bricks in size. And again, Q1 2018. So I would think that this hardware can end up in laptops, but also in tiny little PCs. And why not, as the saying goes? So considerably more grunt to it than just an Intel CPU with Intel graphics. But this is just the start of things. If this is, and as far as I can see, those two CPU models, it's just two at present. But how many will be spawned in the family remains to be seen. Sounds very interesting. I do have a few thoughts on the subject. One is obviously how this will impact Nvidia. Two, what happens in the near future, throughout 2018, moving into 2019, certainly in terms of AMD Raven Ridge and laptops with AMD. I've got the laptop here that's got Polaris graphics in it, but Vega graphics, I mean, instinct without seeing Vega mobile graphics is horribly hot and toasty. Could be completely wrong, but who knows. So if AMD can't package Vega in a mobile system with sensible power draw and therefore sensible battery life, it could be that they're basically waving the white flag and they're going to supply their graphics to Intel instead. It could be we will see AMD Mobile, as in Raven Ridge and Vega, along with Ryzen 7, Ryzen 5. That would be a good thing to see if it works correctly, but obviously they know how it performs, we don't. So question there over Raven Ridge, are we going to see it? And if so, is it going to be really pushed, or is it going to just die a death? I noticed just this morning actually that Vega 64, Vega 56, there was also the Nano version, which I saw waved around in Los Angeles at an AMD event, and SIGGRAPH, and it's still TBA, missing in action, hasn't been launched as far as I'm aware. So it would appear that Vega is just kind of tottering along. Also, I have another thought, and this is after I had a call with our man Simon Crisp, or Mr. Storage as I think of him, which is, my question to Simon was, could Intel release a future CPU that doesn't support PCI Express? So the processor connects over EMID to the AMD graphics. It's got HBM2. You've got, minimal PCI Express. You've got links to the chipset, so you can do your USB and networking and audio, but no more than that. Not enough spare PCI Express for graphics. In other words, cutting Nvidia out of the loop. And his response was, Optane. Wonder what happens with Optane, because at the moment we're only seeing Optane as a kind of a caching thing for hard drives, which is of no interest whatsoever. But we know that Intel is looking at Optane as a way of combining storage and system memory. You'll have RAM-less systems in the future. You'll just have storage, but very fast storage. I wonder whether Intel can or will kill off PCI Express. If they do that, does Nvidia have any way of connecting to a CPU in a gaming laptop in this case? We know the world's moving away from PCs over time, mobile devices more and more. Clearly for gamers at the moment, laptops is the thrust. I have to wonder how that's going to go in the next 1, 2, 3 years. Again, comments below. Might be talking complete bilge, might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory. I might be technically completely inaccurate. Let me know what you think. And then we move back to AMD. Raja Koduri, the chap who was running their graphics side of things, top executive at AMD, he stepped back after the launch of Vega and took a sabbatical, which it turned out was 40 days of sabbatical. And then we saw an internal announcement that he was leaving AMD. One of those, I'm sorry chaps, I'm off, see you around kind of things. It has to be said, the timeline of Vega, it was painful. It took so long to come out. Then at SIGGRAPH we saw the 56 and the 64. When Raja launched with loads of hoopla, we saw other things there as well, like Threadripper. But it was notable at the time that Vega 56 and 64, there were no gaming metrics whatsoever. It was all just talk. There was no numbers. And it was like, oh dear. And it turned out that Vega didn't really trouble GTX 1080, therefore in many respects was a flop. The problem being was horrible power draw because they cranked up the speed to try and make it compete with 1080. Pricing was also nasty, and as it turns out, suppliers were non-existent. A terrible combination. And then Raja stepped down as his role of head of Radeon Technologies Group. He's now left AMD and joined Intel. He's joined Intel as Senior Vice President, Intel Chief Architect, Senior Vice President of the newly formed Core and Visual Computing Group, and he starts his role in early December, which makes you wonder what's going on there. You can't blame the man for jumping over to Intel, but had a senior guy from AMD announced a couple or 3 months ago that they were leaving AMD to go to Intel, that would have sounded like treachery of the highest order. You'd think he'd be dead to AMD and anyone that knows him. But now we know that AMD and Intel have been working together on this new processor with graphics package. Quite clearly there have been talks at a high level between the two companies. You have to assume that Raja was involved in that. How could he not have been? he's moving across. You would assume that a senior level executive would be under a non-compete clause in his contract for months, if not a year, possibly even 2 years. So the fact he's able to go to Intel, knowing what he knows about AMD graphics, suggests either he has no non-compete clause, which would be bizarre, or everyone's happy with the situation. So you have to take it that this is his way of leaving AMD, leaving Vega behind, and working on getting AMD graphics into Intel mobile processors. I can see no other way of looking at it, but it is the most extraordinary turn of events. And goodness me, how things are looking as we move through this year. It's been a bizarre 2017. And here we are on the second Leo says, and I'm feeling more confused than ever. Again, more questions than answers. Leave your comments below, however. Inform me of what you think about this. So if you like this video, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. If you want more from Kit Guru, click to subscribe. I'm Leo Waldock. This is Leo Says.